And it's Monday morning. We are recapping preseason week 2, which saw a lot of starters play. Some good things from the Steelers offense, good things from the Giants offense. Jimmy Garoppolo got out there and he looked okay. Devontae Adams played one snap. We'll tell you everything that you need to know. Ramondre Stevenson was lined up at wide receiver. Great stuff going on in preseason week 2. And I am Adam Azer with Heath Cummings and Jamey Eisenberg. We're going to give you our winners and losers, our rankings, risers, and fallers. And wow! We're going to start with our wow moment or wow player or wow team. And Jamey, I want to start with yours because it makes me very happy inside. What was your your wow team from preseason week 2?
Well, I did this just to appease you, of course, but I do like the fact that Heath is wearing the team colors as well. I think it's fun to see what this Giants offense might, turn into now that they have, maybe some better pass catchers. And getting healthier as well. Sterling Shepard coming back also. But that first drive, my gosh, Daniel Jones looked great. Darren Waller looked awesome. 4 targets, 3 catches. If he had come down with that one where, seemingly dropped, but he just got popped really good, would have been even more impressive. So you were there to see it in person, so you probably have a better idea of what it looked like and what it sounded like. I'm sure the crowd was really excited.
Well, but Waller, if you were in my seats, if you had my seats, you know that I did not have a better view than what you had on.
Okay, well, Waller looked fantastic. I think Paris Campbell is going to actually be a thing, depending on what again happens to, potentially Shepard and Wan'Dale Robinson at some point. But he's definitely of interest. And this was all without Saquon Barkley. So take that into account. And it's the preseason, but I think Daniel Jones could have a very take a leap in terms of what his production could be. And as a passer, now that he has a legitimate pass catcher. And Waller, I think, again, I've been excited about him, but can challenge to be that second fantasy tight end this year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, I don't think I drafted any Daniel Jones. And watching that drive, Heath, I think, you're always trying to project pass heavy, run heavy. I don't know. I mean, he threw 9 passes on that drive. They didn't have Barkley, as Jamey said, but we're going to see a different, this is not your father's Giants offense.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it was one of those things where and we've talked about this, like if you were excited about the Giants or you were interested in being excited about the Giants, you have every reason to watch that performance and be excited about the Giants. Yeah. Like I don't think that did they have a run play? The only run play was Daniel Jones scrambling, right?
No, they had a handoff, I think, to Jalen Hyatt, and I think they had a Matt Breida run on that drive too, I think. Speaking of Jalen Hyatt, he also is having a good preseason. We'll talk about him later.
Like it was an impressive performance. It'll be interesting to see how the offensive line holds up when the other team plays their pass rushers. But there it was good.
Okay. I don't know if you saw my tweet, but let's say you guys I went to the game as Jamey mentioned. I was in seats 1 through 4. There were people in seats 5 and 6. We were the only people in the entire row of 16 seats. So we sit down. If you're in seats 5 and 6, how do you not move over a seat, right?
You were with your family?
Yeah, I was with my wife and my 2 kids, my screaming kid Andrew was just like cheering at anything. Just like, yeah. Like, so, I mean, I thought it was funny. I'm sure they thought it was funny. Like, why didn't they move down? I didn't mind, but I would have moved down. Aren't you? If you go to the movies and you can leave a seat open next to you, don't you leave a seat open next to you?
Did you say something? Like, no, hey, not. Look, that whole row is empty.
No.
But how many open seats were there?
10.
So you could have gone and sat 6 seats away from them.
Yeah, but
I can see why
I can see why Adam didn't move because he's with his 2 kids. But I would have probably said, wow, look at all that space over there. Hey, why don't you go?
Seats were next to them. There were no empty seats next to me. I don't know. Anyway, Heath, what was your wow moment this week?
Well, you should go first because you stole the most obvious one and the one that I like the most. But I'll go ahead and say, other than the one you were going to say, it was Tyjae Spears. And it wasn't the first time. That dude's quick and looks like an NFL running back. And we've not been like, you're getting ready to talk about the best handcuff in fantasy football. We've not been really drafting Spears with the other top handcuffs. And I think that Spears probably deserves to be in that, especially considering that the only reason that we're not drafting Derrick Henry in the first 5 picks is because he's 29 years old and we're worried that he's going to break down. If that does happen, then Spears is free money.
Pittsburgh's offense is what everybody's talking about right now. And I was interested after the first preseason game when they seemed pretty aggressive, pretty pass happy, felt like they showed a little more confidence in Pickett, and they backed it up in this game. And they played against the Bills' first team defense, and they were kicking their butt. They were up 14-0 in about 5 minutes. Jaylen Warren is that handcuff that Heath was talking about. We probably shouldn't even call him a handcuff anymore, right? I mean, I was thinking, what's the difference now between Jaylen Warren and Samaje Perine? Who would you guys rather have? He had a 62-yard touchdown run, Jaylen Warren. So you can answer that first, Warren or Perine?
Perine still. I'm very, very concerned still about these guys coming back from their ACL injuries.
That's the big difference between Warren and Perine, is that Najee Harris is not coming back from an ACL.
Okay.
I also think for Perine, I know Javonte Williams had 5 targets and 4 catches, but Perine still played on the majority of third downs.
Yeah. But anyway, the Pittsburgh offense in general, maybe they're going to be better, and it's inspired me to draft Deontay Johnson. I did it over the weekend in the FFT Open, 58th overall in a 2-receiver PPR league. Yeah, I don't know. Heath, feeling better about the Steelers offense than we were a couple weeks ago?
A little bit. I haven't moved. I think maybe a couple of guys have moved because guys have gone behind them. But I was already pretty high on Pat Freiermuth, and I was already pretty high on Deontay Johnson relative to where his ADP was. I'm still kind of down on Pickens, but I drafted Deontay in the best ball championship as well. I think in round 8, round 7, round 8. So yeah, I like him as a borderline number 2 wide receiver in full PPR, and I think he probably catches over 100 passes. It's kind of a battle between Muth and Pickens. And I think the real interesting thing, and you've kind of hit on it a little bit, and we've talked about it a lot this offseason, is how run heavy are the Steelers going to be. We've got that 6 or 7 game sample size from the end of last year after TJ Watt got healthy when they went super run heavy. But that's not something Matt Canada's ever done before.
Jamey, what do you think? I mean, you guys both have Najee Harris. I mean, it's funny, like we're talking about how great the Steelers offense looks. We're not Najee Harris, though. What do you? What's your outlook now for the Steelers? Are you higher on them than you were 2 weeks ago?
Yes, so I was somewhat pessimistic about Pickens, but it's, you're seeing him do some different things, which is obviously important. Forget about the highlight catches because a lot of that is pass interference where he's pushing off guys. But I think just seeing a better Kenny Pickett. That's the biggest thing is, and I think this is what you're talking about. The trust in Kenny Pickett seems to be there. And so they've had playmakers, they drafted great the last couple of years. Freiermuth, I think, is going to be a playmaking tight end. Pickens is going to be a significant receiving option. And so I've always kind of been hovering around, Deontay Johnson's kind of gone from 24 to 26, just depending moves guys around. I'm keeping him right now at 24. In PPR, he's a little bit lower in non-PPR. Pickens has probably jumped about 5 or 6 spots for me. So he was right around wide receiver 38. Now I think I have him at 33. So I could see a similar path to success for him like a Jahan Dotson. I like Dotson better, but second receiver on the team, probably going to have more touchdowns than the first receiver, as we saw last year in the case of both those guys.
Right.
And I think going to see better quarterback play, like in the case of both of those second-year guys. So very high-end number 3 receivers, but I'll say what I say all the time. You can go from receiver 22, 20 to receiver like 35, 36. Any one of those guys could be, you'd rather have him as your third receiver, but you could be your second receiver as well.
Got a donation here on for St. Jude in our chat. If you're watching on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyfootball today, there's a donate button, I think, below the chat. So please feel free to donate anything you can. We'd appreciate it. It all goes to St. Jude. We got about 10 days left. Our draftathon is next Wednesday. I'll tell you about that in a second. George Pickens or a rookie wide receiver, Addison or JSN? Pickens or those guys?
Addison, JSN, Pickens for me.
All right. Pickens first for Jamey. Pickens last for Heath. Pickens or Gabe Davis?
Pickens.
Gabe.
All right. So a difference of opinion there. Who's the biggest rankings riser for you guys this weekend, Heath?
Probably the combination of Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. The Dolphins running backs not named Devon Achane. Achane suffering a hopefully not major injury, but also it just seems like he's clearly behind those two guys. And I'd been ranking it as if it'll take a couple of weeks and then Achane will maybe not be the lead back, but be the best back to roster on the Dolphins. And now I've moved Wilson and Mostert both ahead of them. Still only round 10 picks, but they weren't somebody I was drafting even that early before this weekend.
And you prefer Wilson to Mostert?
Just slightly.
And how do you rank Wilson versus Jalen Warren? Very different players. I think.
I've got them in the same round. I currently have Wilson ahead.
I mean, does your team construction matter at that point?
Yes.
Yeah. So just go ahead and say it out loud. Like, how does it affect whether you're drafting Jeff Wilson or Jalen Warren?
If I've drafted like on a 0 RB build, I would rather have Jeff Wilson. And if I'm looking at a true number 4 running back, then I'd rather have Jalen Warren.
Okay. Yeah, I would say hero RB also for Wilson.
Jamey, who's your biggest rankings riser?
I mean, aside from some of the guys we've talked about, it's been kind of a gradual rise, but like Jalen Warren is clearly one, where he was in the mid 40s. Now he's 39 for me, so jumped up several spots. Daniel Jones moved up to QB 14. Trying to think who else. Big riser.
Jordan Love.
I did move Jordan Love and Kenny Pickett ahead of Ryan Tannehill. I did have Tannehill ahead of those guys. And just after seeing, the last couple of preseasons. Oh, Jaden Reed is a big riser for me. He's jumped about 40 spots, so he was like around wide receiver. He was around like 160 overall. He's not in my top 60 yet. He's at 61, but he's in that same mix for me as like a Jacoby Myers, Rondell Moore, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Chiefs receivers, those type of guys. But I think, and this makes me a little bit concerned about Christian Watson, that is it going to be a spread offense here because they have so many young options that are going to play well. I mean, Luke Musgrave is somebody to keep an eye on. Obviously, Romeo Dobbs. Is Watson going to clearly dominate targets? I think he's definitely the one you draft first and still draft him as a number 2 receiver. But, I think you should definitely put some attention, if you haven't done so already, on Dobbs and Reed just because of what Jordan Love is doing right now. He looks good.
Yeah, I think Dobbs for me is someone that I have to start drafting. And look, I brought this up. I don't know if it was last week, but I brought this up somewhat recently. We've gotten a lot of Romeo Dobbs love from the reporters. And I feel like as a fantasy community kind of brushed it aside. After the NFL draft, the beat writer and the Athletics beat writer predicted that Romeo Dobbs would lead the team in catches. And then there was a report that he had the best connection with Jordan Love. And then if you just look at so far through the preseason, when Jordan Love has been on the field, you've got Luke Musgrave, Romeo Dobbs, and Christian Watson all playing 28 to 29 snaps, all running between 16 and 19 routes. And Musgrave actually has the most targets. He has 6. But Dobbs has the best production by far. 4 catches, 73 yards, and a touchdown on 4 targets. Watson has 2 catches for 6 yards on 3 targets. And Jaden Reed has only played 16 snaps and run 12 routes, so about 2/3 of the involvement as the other guys, but he has 3 targets as well. So, look, I don't know how much you care. Apparently, Christian Watson was talking to Dave about this morning. Watson's been great in practice. It's 29 snaps, 28 snaps over 2 games. But Dobbs has been better than Christian Watson. How are we supposed to interpret all of this data right now as we consider Christian Watson? I mean, you took him 36th, Heath, in a mock draft last week. So, yeah, what are we thinking here about the Packers' wide receivers?
I think we have to be careful making too much out of target share in the preseason. Like I would assume that Musgrave has seen the most targets because they want to see the most from him. So I'm not taking too much out of that, but I am a little bit less comfortable with Watson than I was. I agree with Jamey. I still think Dobbs is probably my favorite value in terms of where they're being drafted out of all of these guys. I still mostly view Reed and Musgrave as lottery ticket types that are more likely to be dropped than be contributors on your fantasy team. But if those two are both involved, then it's definitely going to be a bad thing for Christian Watson.
I'll give you 2 things. First off, the stuff that we saw, which was go back to the start of last season. Dobbs was better than Watson. And then Dobbs got hurt. And that's really when Watson took off. And so you remember he had, I think it was a toe or an ankle injury. And Matt LaFleur talked about this at the owners' meetings, that Dobbs was, off to such a great start. And then he got hurt and he didn't really get back to that level. But the other part of this is what LaFleur said at the owners' meeting. He said when he looks at Romeo Dobbs and he goes, I'm going to be very careful what I say here, that he's got a lot of Devontae Adams type movement to him. And so, they really value him. And so while Watson as an athlete is probably better and will do some different things that I don't think Romeo Dobbs can do,
Right.
That doesn't mean like what Heath said, that or you said, Adam, that he could lead the team in receptions, that he could be a favorite target for Jordan Love. But the best part about both these guys is, and even Reed and Musgrave, like we're talking about concentrated targets to those 4 guys, and to I don't know what varying degrees, but varying degrees, and then you factor in what Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon bring to the table too. We know where the ball's going. It's like that's the fun part about it. You know where the ball's going. And so is it going to be 10% more to Watson in terms of target share? Is it going to be 20%? That's, I think, the thing you got to be a little bit cautious about, how much you're excited about Watson. But look, if Watson hits, he's going to be awesome. If Dobbs hits, he's going to be, I think, startable. I think that's the way you want to approach it.
What will this finally be the first time in 4 years that Aaron Jones doesn't finish second on the Packers in targets? Hopefully, for everybody we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I had one of those moments, Dave and Jamey have both talked about this, where you're on the clock and you look at your rankings and you have 2 guys ranked back to back, and you don't know if you want to take the guy who's ranked higher. And for me, it was Romeo Doubs and Elijah Moore. Like those 2, I am really struggling with ranking right now. I actually took Elijah Moore because I thought that he had more upside and it was the best ball championship. But I think I prefer Dobbs. I've got him 1 spot higher.
Would you take?
I do too.
All right, fine. So let's go that same team. Would you take Christian Watson or Amari Cooper?
Watson.
Definitely Watson in the best ball championship. But I think still Watson. Yeah.
Christian Watson or Keenan Allen, PPR?
Watson.
I'm gonna make a change right here. I'm gonna go with Keenan Allen.
Okay. All right. We're gonna all try to make a change by donating to St. Jude. Our draftathon is next Wednesday, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern. We're gonna have guests from all over the industry. Ben Gretsch is gonna open the show with us. You remember Ben Gretsch? Joe Pisapia is lined up. We got incredible guests: Jake Seeley, Joey Wright, Tara Roberts. We've got like a full lineup of awesome guests, including Pete Prisco, Will Brinson, Nick Costos is coming on the show. We got a big fun show planned for you. 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. No commercial breaks. All of it's on YouTube. YouTube.com/fantasy football today.
Don't forget our famous artiste.
Our famous artiste, Jesse Eisenberg.
No, he likes to draw things.
Sketcher Doodle.
No.
I don't know. Dave?
What does Nando like to do to you?
Oh, no. Nando DeFito, of course, will be on for 2 hours. So yeah, but really the whole point is to raise as much money as possible. And it kind of culminates in that big draftathon show. But go to tinyurl.com/FFT donate right now. Let's see how much the spot in the Leftovers League is going for. You can get a spot in our podcast Leftovers League, 10-team super flex. Right now, it is up to $666, and we have 3 days left. So, and there's a lot of stuff that you can bid on here, and it all goes to St. Jude. tinyurl.com/FFT donate.
How much would I have to bid to change the name back to the For the People League instead of calling it the Leftovers League?
You know what? This was a high-level decision that I got overruled, I think, on. So we can't change it, but yeah, I actually like the Leftovers League. It's got a nice alliteration, and it reminds me of one of the best TV shows I've ever seen, The Leftovers. So there's that. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, the biggest rankings faller. I have a couple of IDP sleepers I'll just mention. When's our IDP draft? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
All right. And we've got the rest of the news, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Cooper Kupp updates, and a lot more from the weekend. We'll be right back. All right, we talked about the wow moments, impressed with the Giants, impressed with the Steelers, impressed with Tyjae Spears, Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert rising for Heath, Jaylen Warren rising for everyone, Jaden Reed in the mix, talked about the Packers wide receivers. Let's get a little negative here. Jamey, who's the biggest rankings faller for you?
Heath mentioned one in Devon Achane, the concern about the shoulder, but also the usage. I read something, I think it was in Sports Illustrated, Alan Poupar and Omar Kelly, who covered the Dolphins for them, saying that Poupant, I think is how you pronounce it. I apologize. That Savon Ahmed or Myles Gaskin is going to make the team, but at this point, both those guys I think have been running ahead of Devon Achane. Certainly Ahmed has. So you just see the way that this depth chart is shaking out, and does not look good for Achane to have the impact, as Heath alluded to, prior to maybe the first few weeks of the season.
Biggest faller, Heath?
I guess I'm going to say Jamison Williams. just because I'm just not drafting him anymore. And I was pretty low on him in the first place, but just like inability to stay healthy, lack of experience practicing with the team, definitely not going to be with the team for the first 6 weeks of the season. No telling what type of shape he's going to be in and whether he's going to be able to stay healthy when he gets there, and where he's at on they're trying to add another wide receiver right now. So pick him up off the waiver wire if you want to in week 7.
Yeah, and this is Jameson Williams, Lions' second-year receiver. I'm just looking up his stats. He ran 26 routes. He played a lot, and he had 2 catches for 18 yards on 7 targets, including a dropped deep ball. It was catchable. If he had caught that, his line looks a lot better. But didn't exactly have a great preseason debut a couple of weeks ago, Jameson Williams. All right, we have to talk about Najee Harris, guys, because I want to know where you're ranking Najee Harris, if you've moved him down.
Yes.
It's like the Steelers offense is running away from Najee Harris. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think? Jamey, Najee, go ahead.
Well, I mean, look, it's not so much what Jaylen Warren did with the 62-yard touchdown run, which, I can't imagine people seeing that and not getting excited about him and not being concerned about Najee, but it's the playing time. The fact that they're using Jaylen Warren in the spots that they're using him, and what we saw at the end of last season as well. Look, I mean, Jaylen Warren's been a more explosive player than Najee Harris in their short time together. And you've heard just nothing but positive reports, going back to the NFL draft about what they want to do with Jaylen Warren and offseason, mini camps, all those things about getting him on the field. And so, it's I don't think Najee's going away. I think he's still going to be the goal line option. I think he's still going to play on first and second down, but is he going to be involved in the passing game? Is he going to be on the field as much as he has been? That was the allure of Najee Harris, was him staying on the field. The allure of the Steelers running back. Mike Tomlin's running backs have played 3 downs consistently, and hopefully when they stayed healthy, been very productive. Najee's not necessarily profiling like that right now. So he's still worth drafting as a number 2 running back, but he went from a guy I was taking in round 3 to a guy I'm taking toward the end of round 4.
Yeah, Heath, where do you have Najee Harris?
Well, I already had him in round 4. I have moved him down to round 5 now. And I just don't think I'm probably going to get him, but I've got him 21st at running back now. The names that I always give, the long list of guys who have been as inefficient as him, I'm not going to give the list, but 3 combined top 20 seasons from the 9 running backs who have seen as many touches of him in their first 2 years. I'm not going to bet on him being a top 20 running back this year. And I just wonder, like, I know Mike Tomlin's history, and I lean on coaching history as much as anybody. And the way he's used running backs, we saw a little crack in that midway through last year, where all of a sudden he had a 3rd down back, and he hadn't really done that very much in the past. And then there was some talk this offseason about how Jaylen Warren needs more work. And I know what we all saw watching that run, but I just think of Matt Canada and Mike Tomlin watching Jaylen Warren break that run and run past safeties. And there's no way they don't think we have to get that guy the ball more.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing I keep going back to, though, with him is how much was the foot a problem, for Najee last year? And is he healthy? And so a healthy Najee Harris may change some things. It's not, I think, changing what exactly Heath said, that they're going to get another guy on the field and giving him, the chance to play more. But there's the other side of this with Jaylen Warren, is that you're getting him at a much better value, clearly. His ADP is going to rise from what's happened this weekend. But if there is the Najee injury and he misses time, he's a league winner. He's an absolute league winner. So these are the type of guys you want to get in on, because you can use him if you need him as a flex. You don't want to have to use him because he's probably not going to get a lot of production, at least right away. But if Najee goes down, then he becomes that guy. And then you probably won your league because of getting a player like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about some running backs that I keep seeing, being taken in maybe late round 4 to through round 5. And I want to know how many of them you'd take over Najee Harris. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I think I'd take all of these guys over Najee Harris. So just tell me, would you take this player over Najee Harris? Dameon Pierce.
Easily.
Yep.
J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, was there for me before this weekend.
I still got Dobbins behind.
James Conner.
Yep.
Yes.
Alexander Madison.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, might get a little tougher here. Ken Walker.
No.
Najee.
Breece Hall.
Najee.
Okay. All right. And then, so our rankings followers: Devon Achane, Jameson Williams, Najee Harris. A couple of players that showed up in preseason at middle linebacker or inside linebacker. Miami linebacker David Long. This was a guy they signed from the Titans who just cannot stay healthy. But a lot of people thought this was a great under the radar signing. He could get a lot of tackles in that Dolphins defense. David Long and Philadelphia linebacker Nakobe Dean, young player who's going to replace TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards in our IDP league was the 5th best linebacker for the Eagles. In IDP, he was on the Eagles last year. He needs to be replaced. Nakobe Dean looks like he's going to be the guy doing that. And I looked at, look, I'm not really a big IDP guy, but I looked at 4 different IDP rankings for David Long and Nakobe Dean, and they're pretty low on the linebacker list. So just want to throw those names out there. All right, let's talk about some guys who were at one point maybe first-round picks, then second. Now you'll see them going in the 3rd round. Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs. Jonathan Taylor will be back with the team this week. He was excused for personal reasons. He's still not healthy, apparently. Josh Jacobs is expected to, this was pretty vague, but the Las Vegas Review-Journal says Josh Jacobs expected to report to the team before week 1, but not really clear that he'll be ready for week 1. You can't just show up and then they're going to throw him in for like a full workload in week 1. So I had a very hard time picking between the two of them, Taylor and Jacobs. Jamey, when do you take Taylor and Jacobs, and who do you take first?
I would take Jacobs first right now. And Jacobs is in the back end of round 2, and Taylor is in the beginning of round 3.
Same question to you, Heath.
Same answer.
Okay. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, or these guys? Or both?
QBs.
I still have Jacobs ahead of the quarterbacks, but another week of this, and the quarterbacks will move ahead of Jacobs also.
Okay. Cooper Kupp will practice this week. Hooray. Cleveland head coach Kevin Stefanski says he wants Elijah Moore to be a big part of the offense, and we've seen that, and we're looking forward to that. Jacksonville running back Tank Bigsby had a really good game, 13 carries for 70 yards and a catch. It was backups versus backups in that game, Jaguars-Lions, but Doug Peterson said that Bigsby could see a bigger role as the season progresses. Is anyone getting nervous about Travis Etienne?
Not really. Just more excited about Bigsby.
Okay. Houston wide receiver Tank Dell, the star of the first preseason game week, was held out. He had tightness in something. Did not see what it was, but Tank Dell, the precautionary. Talked about Devon Achane hurting his shoulder. And there was an article in the Palm Beach Post that was pretty glowing about Jeff Wilson, sort of making the case for Wilson as the top guy in that backfield. Buffalo running back Damian Harris missed the game with a knee injury. He did return to practice last week, but wasn't ready to play in this game. Chicago offensive guard Tevin Jenkins could miss time with a leg injury, and that would be a pretty significant blow for them. Hopefully he's back soon. And Jacksonville defensive tackle Devon Hamilton is out indefinitely with a back injury. I got a whole big list of rankings risers and rankings fallers from Heath and Jamey, and let's get right to it. Heath, you told us about Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and Jalen Warren, but there are a lot of players here that we haven't talked about, including Geno Smith, who on CBS is QB 17, on Fantasy Pros is QB 16. Geno Smith is a riser for you.
Yeah, and it's just like I didn't have a lot of huge movers, but I did move Geno ahead of Aaron Rodgers. Man, JSN, you're talking about another guy who has had some wow moments the first couple of preseason games, including in week 2. It's just a reminder of how special a talent he is. And you pair that with DK Metcalf, you pair that with Tyler Lockett. Listen, there's probably a 15, 16, 17 QB1s this year. Geno Smith's definitely one of them. And I would not be surprised. Like, there's been talk about how much is he going to regress from last year. He might be better than he was last year.
When you guys are drafting a quarterback in that range, if it's Cousins, Geno, Daniel Jones, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, I don't think we're going to put like Russell Wilson in that group, but maybe whatever. Is there anything that determines who you pick? Is it, if I already have my QB1, I take this guy. If I don't have a QB1 yet, I take this guy. Do you just mix it up? It's just, those guys are tough, I think, to differentiate from each other. How do you guys differentiate them?
If I don't have a QB1, I'm taking 2 of them. Typically, the one that I'm looking for with the most upside is Daniel Jones, because he does something just a little bit different with his legs. So if you're going to get another 700-yard rushing season from him, and then he does improve slightly as a passer, then you're going to be very happy to have Daniel Jones on your team if the sort of carryover from the Brian Daboll coaching plus the addition of Darren Waller is there. But I think if you don't get one of those guys, like, to me, Cousins is very similar to Dak. And we've had this conversation, so We're actually doing tiers today on CBS Sports HQ, quarterback tiers. And I don't usually do tiers, but I had to give them for the show. And so my final tier of the starting group, I did put Cousins, who's my QB 13, in with Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott. And so those are kind of like the fallback top 12 guys, per se. So it's a, baker's dozen essentially. Once you get past those guys, though, I think Geno, Jones, Rodgers, and Goff, they all could be top 10 guys. I mean, they're all capable of that. It's just a matter of who will fall out of that group, if you're banking on somebody else. And obviously ADP tells us something differently, certainly on our site, where Tua Tagovailoa and Anthony Richardson are not being drafted as starters right now, which is very surprising.
Right.
So I think, again, it's sort of, if you need a second quarterback, like I wouldn't necessarily, and this is probably a mistake, but I wouldn't necessarily want to pair Daniel Jones with Anthony Richardson because there could be too much volatility there. But like, if I take Anthony Richardson, I'm looking more at the safer options, just in case Jones does falter. And last year was kind of a fluke, which doesn't look like that's going to be the case, but you never know.
Yeah, it's pretty much for me, it's Jones or Geno, just because Cousins goes earlier usually in the drafts that I'm in. But I have Cousins, Jones, and Geno in a tier, and then I have Rodgers and Wilson and Goff in a tier behind those guys. So I usually, if I draft one of those guys, it's Jones or Geno, and it's usually after I've taken Tua or Richardson.
Right. Richardson is in ADP. He's with this group. For us in the rankings, he's way ahead. I guess I'm a little unclear about Cousins. Jamey, you said he is with the starters, so he's ahead of them. How about for you, Heath? Is he definitively ahead of Geno and Jones?
I've got Jones, Cousins, Geno back to back in round 10.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry. All right. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are risers for you. And that's interesting. I actually didn't give this note. Baker Mayfield didn't play, but Todd Bowles said he's not naming a Buccaneers starting quarterback.
Trash look good.
Is that why Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are risers for you?
It's a couple of things, and it's more projections changes. But also, I do think that like Trask gives them a little more floor than I was. If Trask was awful, then they had the floor of bad Baker, which we know how bad that is. We saw it with DJ Moore last year. But there was a couple things. The Russell Gage injury causes me to think that the targets are going to be a little bit more concentrated. And then, like, I don't know that I've gone into this year thinking Tampa Bay definitely wants to run it a lot more than they have when Tom Brady was quarterback. Their run game looks awful. I'm not sure that they are going to be able to run it very often, even with Rashad White. So I've upped their pass volume just a tad, but concentrated their targets more as well without Russell Gage there.
Michael Thomas is a riser for you.
Yeah, getting good reports. He's staying healthy. He looked good in the first preseason game. It was again a small move, but I did move him up a little bit
to a top 100 pick.
Yeah, he's a round 8 pick for me.
Okay, that's Michael Thomas. Would you rather have Michael Thomas or Odell Beckham?
Thomas.
Romeo Doubs or Michael Thomas?
Ooh. They are within 3 spots in the overall rankings, but I've got Thomas slightly higher right now.
I mean, that really should tell you about the value that people can get for Romeo Doubs. I hope it continues to be that way. I don't know how much he'll rise in ADP. And 2 tight ends on your risers list, Chigo Okonkwo and Luke Musgrave. Yeah,
Musgrave just moving him up into that top 20 range where maybe he makes a difference. Both still just a tight end 2. But there's just been too much of a drumbeat to completely ignore him at a position where it doesn't take that much to become a top 12 guy. And then Okonkwo, like there was at the beginning of training camp some talk from Vrabel that didn't sound super positive. And then there was the signing of DeAndre Hopkins, and I kind of cooled on him. But he has played 100% of their snaps when they only have 1 tight end in the field, which is a big change from last year. And now that Burks is not going to be there at the start of the year, I think there's a little more opportunity for him to get off to a good start. So Okonkwo back in that borderline top 12 range for me.
All right. Again, Heath's risers, Geno Smith, Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Warren, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, Chigo Okonkwo, and Luke Musgrave. Let's head on over to Jamey's risers. Jamey's got 2 quarterbacks on his list, Jordan Love and Kenny Pickett. ADP has Jordan Love at about quarterback 25 or 26, Kenny Pickett at QB 21. Where are you moving Love and Pickett, and who do you like better?
I like Love slightly better than Pickett, but I still love Pickett. But I think you look at the just the way these guys have played, and the offenses that they're in, and I don't think we give Pickett the love of what he might do with his legs as well. He did run quite a bit, or a good enough amount in college that you can potentially buy into that. That he might do, be a 300, 400 yard type of rusher. But again, I think just look at the weapons that these guys have. I think they're worth drafting as quarterback 2s with upside.
And as far as Love goes, we don't want him to make bad throws because someone's going to pick it.
True.
Right. Okay. And you said you moved them ahead of Ryan Tannehill.
Yes. So they were, I think, 20. I think I had it Howell, Tannehill, Love, Pickett, and I just moved Tannehill behind those guys.
What about Matthew Stafford versus Love and Pickett?
I have Stafford ahead of those guys, but again, I think it's a matter of what you're looking for, floor versus ceiling. So Stafford, I think, gives you a safer floor if he's healthy, but that's the risk you have to worry about with him.
All right. Let's go to your wide receiver risers. George Pickens, who you talked about earlier. Michael Thomas, also a riser for you. And Jaden Reed, who you talked about earlier. And Paris Campbell of the New York Giants. I only said that because people might not know what team Paris Campbell plays for. Yeah. Michael Thomas, though, you share that sentiment with that Heath. You're feeling good about it?
Well, it's funny because, I had sent you that note. I forget where it was from at this point, but I sent you that note last week where there was a lot of concern about Michael Thomas. And apparently he did bounce back, I think, that day in practice. And I think it was one of the Saints beat writers was saying that.
I got it for you if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff Duncan, he said, a former NFL receivers coach asked me from the sidelines today, what's up with Michael Thomas? He can't get off the line of scrimmage. He's getting locked up by a safety. And then he says, my column on the reality of where Michael Thomas is at his return to the playing field after 3 years on the sideline. And that was for NOLA.com.
Yeah, so I had dropped him about 4 or 5 spots, and I just put him back exactly where I had him.
Why?
Because there was some video of him actually looking good, and some of the reports the next day. Maybe he was motivated by that. I don't know what it was, but it was the next day or two. He looked good. And so it's just a matter of if he's healthy, he's worth drafting with a mid-round pick. You don't get overly excited about Michael Thomas at 30 years old, having played 10 games over the last 3 seasons, and say, okay, I'm going to jump all the way back in like we did last year. We got burned, but he's still capable of being a quality receiver. And I do think he's getting better quarterback play this year with Andy Dalton gone.
I do wonder if Michael Thomas literally read the quote that Adam read, because the tape I saw was of him breaking Derwin James' ankles. And the quote says he couldn't get off the line he couldn't get off the line against a safety. I wonder, because they've been practicing together. I wonder if it was James locking him up one day and then Thomas getting his. That's a pretty good safety too.
Yes, no kidding. All right, and then Paris Campbell. I don't know. I guess Giants wide receivers in general. Darius Slayton didn't do anything. Isaiah Hodgins had a long catch or 18-yard catch or something. Paris Campbell is their slot guy right now. Who's your favorite Giants wide receiver?
My favorite Giants wide receiver is still Hodgins because his role is locked in. But I had been somewhat bullish, I guess, with the hope of take the chance on Wan'Dale Robinson when he comes back, and he's a guy that this regime drafted, and hopefully, but he's still on the PUP list. At this point, it's hard to overlook that Paris Campbell's got that role, and I think the one guy that's going to take it from it would be Shepard. And so we'll see if that's the case. But I think if you're looking at their 3 receiver sets at this point, he's the slot guy, and we know what that's kind of been to Daniel Jones. So is he going to be the Shepard slot receiver where it's been the only guy there? No, because I think Waller is a significant upgrade over anything that Daniel Jones has ever played with. But I think Paris Campbell is he in PPR he was in my 190s, and Wan'Dale Robinson was around 170 something, and so I just basically flipped it and took Wan'Dale Robinson out.
Honestly, Jalen Hyatt, if Wan'Dale Robinson, I don't think was worth waiting on. Jalen Hyatt though. Is surging and playing with the starters. So I didn't think there was any chance Jalen Hyatt was going to make a contribution this year. Are you guys getting excited about him?
Half of these guys aren't going to be able to play.
Right.
Well, you can't play 7 wide receivers in a game.
I mean, at this point, Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder, obviously we're not counting on them. It's
Slayton and Hodgins are locked in, right?
As of now, but Hyatt, could certainly get on the field. But yes, I'd say Slayton.
Do you think he's more likely to take Slayton's job or Hodgins?
Slayton.
I think Campbell's. I think he could play out of the slot. But Slayton's, I would say, more likely Slayton's than Hodgins. But I don't know.
What I heard earlier in the year was that Slayton was the one guy who was locked in.
Hyatt is more similar to Slayton, I think, than to Hodgins. But I think we're probably spending a little bit too much time on this. I apologize for that. Juwan Johnson, a riser for you, Jamey.
Yeah, other guys getting great reviews, and just looking at it, what he did last year, the quarterback he has this year, I'm drafting him as a starter. He's moved ahead of Dalton Schultz for me, which is a guy that's falling. And again, when you're taking these late round shots, who's going to be somebody that can maybe hit? I think he fits the profile. Former wide receiver, had a good touchdown season, not a great touchdown season, but did well finding the end zone last year. And Heath talked about this last week with A.T. Perry, just about the Rashid Shaheed injury. I think their top 3 pass catchers right now, if everybody's healthy, are Olave, Thomas. We'll see Kamara, but I think Juwan Johnson's that third guy. And so I think the fact that, forget about the Jimmy Graham situation. Hopefully he's okay. But they do have a lot of guys there. But I think all you're hearing is just great things about what Juwan Johnson has been doing, and I think will continue to do once the season starts.
And Greg Dulcich is someone that Chris on FFT and 5. Greg Dulcich was a loser for Chris, and you guys like Juwan Johnson better than Dulcich at this point.
Yes, that was something that I changed after last week's preseason game. But yes, for sure.
I think I might still have Dulcich ahead, but I haven't really. I have a hard time, and I guess it's probably just because I haven't projected a massive increase in pass volume for the Saints. But if Michael Thomas is there and Chris Olave is there, I have a hard time seeing, and they're going to throw it to their running backs, how Juwan Johnson's going to see more than 4 to 5 targets a game.
Well, Dulcich was the guy that Chris was just saying is not playing enough, basically.
Right. Yeah.
All right. That's just something I just want to throw that out there because I don't think he's in the note. Oh, he is in the notes. He's one of your followers, Heath. Greg Dulcich. Sorry about that.
Yeah. He definitely moved behind Okonkwo. I moved him behind Gerald Everett. I've got him at tight end 18 now. I could be tempted to move him 5 more spots. You get into that 18 range, and the difference between that and 23 is just kind of guesswork at tight end. But it's not good that he's not a full-time player.
When we come back, rankings fallers, find out why Miles Sanders is on both of these guys' fallers lists and why Keenan Allen is on Jamey's. We'll tell you right after this. And Miles Sanders hasn't played yet. He's been nursing a groin injury. Should be back soon, hopefully. He's on both of your fallers lists. Jamey, how come? Let's take a look at your followers first, including Najee Harris. We don't have to talk about him. I've said enough about him earlier in the show. Devon A-Chain, same thing. But Miles Sanders stands out. Why is he a faller, and where'd you move Sanders to?
Bryce Young does not look good. The offensive line does not look good. You're hearing reports just about some struggles there, but it's just a couple spots. It was more about, just shuffling around that group of Najee and Sanders and Connor and Madison. So I just put Sanders closer to where I have Najee right now. I just think I hope he's going to help things, but Bryce Young scares me a little bit right now, and that's a big part of it.
And how about you, Heath? You've always been the Miles Sanders guy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be consistent. I don't want to only move down the hurt guys who I didn't like. So and both Sanders and another guy I'll talk about in a minute, David Montgomery, kind of guys where I had them more than a round ahead of where they were being drafted. And so I've tried, or maybe even 2 in Montgomery's case, and I've tried to, not draft him around earlier than I have to. But it sounds like Sanders is going to be okay. I just am trying to be a little bit consistent on how I rank the injured guys.
Keenan Allen, Jamey, interesting. Why did you move him down?
Part of the reason is because of, I think, the usage we're going to see. His allure is being the slot guy. If they're going to really use Mike Williams in the slot and put him on the outside, that's going to give him some different opportunities, but I think also give him some tougher coverage. And then Quentin Johnston's looking good, as well. So again, distribution of targets may not be the same for him. But again, it was just moving him down a couple spots, not like a significant drop. Plus, he's, again, speaking of being consistent, I can't sit here and rail on Devontae Adams and DeAndre Hopkins being 30 and not give him some sort of a ding as well.
Right. Dalton Schultz, ding.
That offense is also looking a little bit bad, but also a lot of options. So Schultz is being mixed in with some other their tight ends there. And I think we're going to see CJ Stroud spread the ball around. So it was more about when I looked at the end of my top 12 and I was looking at Kincaid, Laporta, Juwan Johnson, and Schultz. I just put Schultz behind all those guys.
All right, Heath, your fallers include Miles Sanders. You talked about David Montgomery. You just Well, we want to expand a little bit on that. You just don't want to be too high on him based on his ADP.
Right. Yeah. It's like I know, and I make this process in my head where if somebody's in the top of my queue and I know they're not going to go for another round and a half, I just don't take them and take them in a round. But I know that a lot of people using my rankings don't do it that way. So I just move him down a little bit to try to make it so nobody's drafting him at the 4 or 5 turn when they can get him in round 6.
Right. Fair enough. By the way, please hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube right now. If you feel like we've earned it, 1,300 people watching, appreciate that. About 219 likes. We can do a little bit better than that. Let's get that up to 300, huh? All right. David Montgomery, Najee Harris, Devon A-Chain, Traylon Burks, same thing. He's just hurt. Earlier, you said he won't. It doesn't look like he'll be there for week 1. How confident are you in that opinion?
I am confident that if he is there in week 1, it seems like it's unlikely that he is like fully ready to go. It looks at the timetable that everybody's giving is like putting him. Maybe he's able to get back just in time for week 1.
Okay, that's Traylon Burks. So, yeah, he should be someone you draft don't need. Right?
I think you put him in that Kadarius Toney range.
Right. Oh my gosh. So we got to talk about the Chiefs wide receivers. Let's get through the rest of your fallers here. Greg Dulcich is, we pretty much covered everyone. Jamison Williams and Greg Dulcich are on this list. All right. Yeah. Chiefs wide receivers. This was, fair to say, worst case scenario for the Chiefs wide receivers, what we saw in this game. Does anybody feel that way?
I don't know what you mean.
I mean, a lot of them played, and none of them had more than 2 targets from Mahomes, who threw 15 or 16 passes. There was nobody who jumped out. There's no hierarchy.
Well, I think you look at playing time. I think that matters, which is
why there wasn't much of a hierarchy there either. I mean,
wasn't Sky Moore on the field the entire time with him?
So let's go through that.
And MVS was like 80%.
No, MVS is the one who's always on the field. 20 snaps for Mahomes. 14 for Kelsey with Mahomes on the field, 15 for MVS. Sky Moore, 12 snaps, 10 routes, which was good, which was tied for the second most. It's only 1 target. But you want to look at routes with Patrick Mahomes. It was MVS with 14, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Sky Moore with 10, Kelsey with 9, Justin Watson 6, Rashee Rice 5, Justin Ross 2, Jerick McKinnon 4.
It seems like it's pretty clearly Sky Moore and MVS are going to be the guys running routes all the time, and somebody else is going to mix in like everybody. And there was no other receiver within. It was more than half of Sky Moore, right?
Justin Watson had 6 routes. Moore had 10.
Okay,
but it'd be nice for Sky Moore to do something. I mean, he has proven nothing so far.
Preseason.
It's still 20 snaps that Mahomes was on the field, and he was only on the field for 12 of them.
It reminded me. It reminded me of. Because they mentioned this in the broadcast. They played the Cardinals week 1 last year. And it was Mahomes can't be great without Tyreek Hill. He'll be good, but he won't be great. And he threw 5 touchdowns in that game. It's like
I'm not talking about Mahomes, though.
But I'm saying, like, he's not throwing 5 to Travis Kelce. He might, but he's not throwing 5 to Travis. Like, there's a reason why I think you don't draft Sky Moore right now in the top 30 to 35 receivers. This is once you get past, like, wide receiver 40 is where he comes into play. So you don't want to overvalue Sky Moore. But it's also a reminder of when you get to the end of your draft, like I take chances on all of these guys. I don't think I've left a draft so far that I've done since Kadarius Toney's injury where I don't have one Chiefs wide receiver, whoever it may be, just because. Yes. It'll be probably the first player that I drop if it's Richie James or, Rashee Rice not doing anything or MVS, just because who he is. Like the ones you want to gravitate toward, I think are more still Toney. Rice, and for me, it's Justin Ross. But I don't think you overlook Richie James. I don't think you overlook Justin Watson. There's going to be some of these guys that are going to be significant, and some of these guys are going to be relevant. It might be a week-to-week thing where you're shuffling in and out, and you regret dropping that player. So it's a great late-round dart throw. Like David said this in every draft we've done. I hate the players on the board when we get to like round 11. Like for me, like this is where the fun starts. Like in taking players like this.
Also, we're getting a lot of comments in the chat about how none of the Chiefs will matter. None of the Chiefs mattered last year. It's just not true. Juju was a top 24 wide receiver for half the year last year. Mecole Hardman had a 5-week span where he was a top 12 wide receiver. Like it might not be the same guy for 17 straight weeks, but there are going to be guys who matter, and they're all dirt cheap. So yes, if we were drafting Sky Moore where we're drafting Christian Watson, then I would be really upset that Sky Moore is not giving us fantasy points in the preseason. But he's a round 9 or round 10 pick.
Right, but he is still being drafted. I mean, I'm looking at Jamey's rankings right now in the FFT Open and just the available wide receivers. I'm in round 8. Jordan Addison, Michael Pittman, Sky Moore, Michael Thomas. So that's not a nothing price tag. You still have Juju, Brandon Cooks. Heath, your rankings right now, Sky Moore is lower, considerably lower. Addison, Thomas, Dobbs, Elijah Moore, Juju, Cooks, Nico Collins, Sky Moore. Yeah. So
like, you're not saying a lot of names that I feel confident starting week 1.
It doesn't. Okay.
I have him ranked for the upside. That's simply why he's in that range.
But keep in mind that you could say that he ran, almost twice as many routes as any other wide receiver not named MVS. Mahomes played 20 snaps and Sky Moore played only 12 of those.
It's the preseason.
I know, but I don't know what to make of that. It's not
okay, but just go with the other names. Take MVS out, right? The only other guy that's played with him is Justin Watson.
Right. But
so
I'm just saying this was not what I wanted to see from Sky Moore. And I also don't think it's a situation necessarily. I don't know that he's not necessarily the veteran player that just didn't play that much because he's this proven veteran and they took him out. Sure. If he's only going to play half the snaps with Mahomes.
So Mahomes threw how many passes? 16?
15.
So if 15, and let's say Sky Moore had 4 for 52 and without a touchdown, you'd feel better?
Of course.
Dramatically better? Like you jump him up 10 spots?
No, but I'd be more comfortable taking him with a top 100 pick. I've taken him, for the record, I've taken him in like each of the last 2 drafts that I've done that have gotten to that point. I'm in a lot of slow drafts. So I'm not opposed to Sky Moore, but he has not done anything in the preseason other than Kadarius Toney getting hurt. The only thing Moore has done is Kadarius Toney got hurt.
That's
and
why
Moore
he hasn't got
starter. It's the Chiefs. But
it's also who he's attached to. I mean, we're not, I
know, but he hasn't done anything good. I really don't think. What has he done?
That's why if he had, he'd be drafted in round 5 or 6 right now.
Right.
Like that's why he's being drafted back with Nico freaking Collins.
Yeah. Like all you've heard is that he's doing well in practice. I mean, it's the same thing like we're hearing about Brandon Cooks. Like you haven't seen Brandon Cooks do anything. I know what Brandon Cooks can do, but he's on a new team.
Brandon Cooks, I think he's done.
I'm saying he's an older player on a new team. Like I'd rather take the upside of a younger player with a better quarterback.
There's another angle here that I'd like to discuss. And who was the second most target? Actually, who was the most targeted? No, nobody had more than 2 targets. But CEH was one of those players that had 2 targets. What if they throw to the running backs more? And what if that helps Pacheco or CEH and they have more of a role than we anticipated?
I mean, have they not always thrown to those guys?
Not really. Certainly not Pacheco. Pacheco got almost no targets.
Yeah, but I would.
What?
I mean, in the AFC Championship game, didn't he have a?
I think so. But when Pacheco took off, that's when McKinnon also was a huge role. Had a huge role and was awesome.
Well, this is just strengthening your case for McKinnon, who you love.
I agree, but McKinnon's only going to play on 3rd down. So I'm saying if he throws to his running backs more on 1st and 2nd down, that could be an extra few points in PPR for those guys. Heath, you don't seem open to this idea at all.
Like there's a lot of things that we need to care about in the preseason, maybe, but like what the Chiefs are doing offensively with their preseason snaps, I don't know how much I care.
I mean, that is fair, but they don't have a Juju Smith-Schuster on this team. Like last year, they didn't have a Tyreek Hill, but at least they had a Juju Smith-Schuster. You've got to look at this wide receiving core. It is not proven at all.
Well, I mean, they did take the Giants' best receiver from a year ago.
Yeah. There's nothing proven on this team at wide receiver. Can we at least
again, look, you're drafting based on what could happen. And what could happen is that Sky Moore takes the Juju role or better because he's younger and more explosive than Juju was last year and hopefully won't miss time like Juju did when he suffered the concussion. So again, we have to do this for what we do for our jobs is project out and anticipate and try to give people some expectations to win their leagues. And this is the type of guy that if he hits is going to be a league winner. I get what you're saying. If he had a 3 catch for a 40-yard day, you'd feel slightly better about taking him in this range. But if he had a 5 for, if he had the Rachie Rice stat line, 8 catches, 90-something yards on 9 targets, like he said, he would now be ahead of 20 receivers, right off the bat.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, I've talked about as much as I can. Not getting anything there. That's fine. What did you guys think of the Falcons offense?
I heard Bijan had a good run. I didn't see it.
First run. That guy looks like he's shot out of a cannon.
It's amazing. He's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I thought that, we had this conversation yesterday, Adam, you and I just talking, that I thought Desmond Ridder looked better, so that was encouraging. The interception wasn't his fault. He's going to, hopefully be good for those guys, to what degree we'll find out, for Drake London and Kyle Pitts. I did think there's a couple of receivers that are going to be annoying that if you're in a very deep draft, take shots on. Mac Hollins, I think, is going to be, involved. Again, very low pass volume, but going to be involved for the Falcons. Kendrick Bourne looks like a guy that Mac Jones is going to lean on. That could be annoying. So those are 2 veteran guys that I don't want to have any shares of in a 5-person bench, but a 15-round draft. But you get a little deeper than that. Those are guys that could, maybe be 3rd, 4th, 5th receivers for you, depending on how many you play.
Okay. Heath, Khalil Herbert did not play. Deontay Foreman started, and Rashawn Johnson had another very good game. Thoughts on the Bears running backs?
I think that I was not sure that Khalil Herbert would be the RB1 to start the year, and it seems like he's probably going to be the RB1 to start the year. I think he's a fine number 3 running back to have. He's got more upside in non-PPR than he does in full PPR.
James Cook played 15 snaps. Josh Allen played 16 snaps. Who of these 3 guys do you feel like who has the highest snap percentage of these 3 guys, or rank them in terms of percentage of snaps they will play in the regular season, like on a weekly basis? James Cook, Dameon Pierce, Ramondre Stevenson.
Percentage of snaps?
Yeah, who's getting the most playing time on a weekly basis? Cook, Stevenson.
Based on what we see right now, I would probably say Cook, sorry. But Pierce,
yeah.
I was impressed that he played on 3rd downs. That was nice to see, because it's not like they're taking him off the field for Singletary.
I'd say total.
I guess I probably
snaps
changed my answer to
Cook.
say Pierce. Yeah, I changed my answer. I'm going to say Pierce.
I'm going to say total snaps Cook, because the Bills might run 100 more plays than the Patriots or Texans.
Fair.
Okay. Yeah, Zeke didn't play, so we didn't get to see that split. But Ramondre Stevenson was absolutely an every down back when he was on the field.
And positive for him that he had a goal line touchdown.
Yep. And Pierce was an every down back too, but not necessarily. What happened with Pierce was he played the first 2 series, and then he left the game, and Singletary came in, and Stroud stayed on the field. So that was it. This running backs just don't play that much. A lot of them, like Barkley Dress, didn't play. Aaron Jones played 1 snap each of the last 2 weeks. So I don't know what that means for Pierce. Was Singletary just going to get that series? He's going to get every 3rd series, or we won't probably know until week 1.
I don't understand the Aaron Jones thing. Like, why play him? Like, they give him a carry. It's just
get him tackled. Rico Dowdle started for the Cowboys. Do you guys have a preference at backup running back for Pollard, at handcuff running back?
Deuce is the only one I'm drafting.
Wide receiver notes: Jalen Hyatt, Jonathan Mingo. They both were working with the first team. Demario Douglas. People said, so I got an email from Matthew. He said, you haven't talked about Patriots receiver Demario Douglas. Would you guys like to talk about Demario Douglas? He's having a very good camp.
We did talk about him on Fantasy Football Today Dynasty last week. You guys should subscribe to that podcast. Yeah, I really think it's probably Juju and Devontae Parker. Douglas could be a waiver ad when and if one of those guys gets hurt later in the year.
It's also worth noting that we haven't seen Gesicki and what this 2 tight end offense will look like too.
Deebo Samuel, 2 catches on 3 targets, 39 yards on the first possession.
Purdy looked good.
Purdy did look good. Pretty good. And Devontae Adams played 1 snap. And at tight end, the only really notes I had were about Dulcich, who we already talked about, not playing much. And thank you, Chris, for that. And Darren Waller, 4 targets, 3 catches, 40 yards on the first possession. lined up out wide. And yeah.
Has Aiden O'Connell made you guys feel any better about Devontae Adams?
No.
Dave would say yes.
Okay.
Dave said Aiden O'Connell looks good. Watch his tape. His first throw was awful. He had a guy wide open deep down the field, no pressure, and he just made a terrible pass. And then after that, he was great. He really was. Oh, very good. So that's the backup quarterback for the Raiders. All right.
Potentially
the backup quarterback, right? That's all I got for today. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for watching and listening. We're back tomorrow with another episode. We have a live stream on Tuesday night. It's actually at 9:00 on Tuesday night. We'll be doing a Superflex draft. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning on Fantasy Football Today.